together a little bit. I don't know, did everybody get a copy of this piece right here? This Live, Give, Oh, Grow. I know this is very, oversimplified, but I believe that not only advisors, but I think it's too easy for us to not tackle something because we think it's too daunting. And I would really encourage you guys to be mindful of what you're thinking about something. If it's too scary, then break it up. Just tackle it in steps. And so there's going to be a piece that's coming around on financial contentment. And last night I mentioned Ron Blue is I just saw him back in February. He and Larry Burkett, kind of the pioneers of the biblical financial industry, and he's like mid-70s now, and he is one of the directors of Kingdom Advisors, and so the principles that he uses, a lot of that is what's integrated into what I share with clients, into what I'm sharing with you guys, because the Bible is where this content is coming from. I'm not coming up with, I may have some original sayings and whatnot, but the content is God's word, and that's why it's good. If it was all my stuff, this would be like a half an hour long, and that's it. Financial contentment. There's 4 or 5 major pieces to what we can be, what would describe our outlook if we are contented. And as you can see on the screen, I know it's a little bit small, copies are handed around. The first one is an eternal perspective. That kind of goes hand in hand with, and this ties all into debt, but when we are viewing everything as God's, what that means is that if it's all His, then every spending decision is a spiritual decision. Now, I want to be clear. Before Courtney and I go out to eat, whenever we do that, we do not pray and ask the Lord whether we should go out to eat. I mean, I'm being frank. We ask for wisdom, we pray, we use wisdom and knowledge that He's given us to set a plan in place. But we don't we don't overdo that and wait for the Lord to have to answer us on that. He has given us the freedom to do that. That's why we feel comfortable doing that. If you're looking at this piece right here, this pie, the reason I love the fact that it's a pie chart and that God owns it all is right at the center is because every single spending decision falls into one of these categories: live, give, oh, grow. But what that also means is that every spending decision affects the others. If you decide to spend more on the live instead of the give, well, they're not independent of each other. That's the principle. There's no independent financial decisions. They are all affecting the others. Well, in this session, what's great is that we're going to talk about the one slice of pie that you can actually eliminate. The O. Well, half of the O. Okay, because the other half is taxes. You can actually eliminate the O. Now, as I said, I have a mortgage, but I believe the first step in the priority order is to understand that God owns it all, and 1B would be to evaluate and measure our contentment. And the process of doing that is listed on the screen here right in front of you. The first one is to have an eternal perspective. If we make better decisions are made when you have a longer term perspective. If you imagine how a general goes to war, if you imagine how they built the Empire State Building. Who's been to the Empire State Building in here? Is there another? What's the next taller building in the U.S.? What's the tallest? I didn't even know that. What's the tallest building in the U.S.? Is there any in the Sears Tower?
Yeah.
Okay. That works. We'll go with that. But they didn't just sit down and say, okay, let's do this. Let's just build it. Let's bring people in. They had an outlook. They had a plan in place. The longer term your outlook, the better your decision making is. When I have somebody that sits down with me and says, we would like to save some money for our children's education, That conversation's a lot easier when the child's 1 than when they're 17. They don't have to say as much as often, okay? Goes a lot better for me too. I don't have to be the bearer of bad news as often. But having an eternal perspective, that takes things into a completely different realm, because this world is not our home. Okay? The description that people sometimes use is that, imagine a dot right here and a line that goes on for infinity. Well, the dot is our time here on earth. And the line with infinity is our time in heaven. Yet, the Lord has very clearly given us the ability to have things that we do in the dot affect the eternity line. The giving and saving are the things that, giving and growing, the G's. In that pie, those are the things that have a future impact. The growing, the saving, will affect our time here on earth. The giving, I believe there's an eternal impact on that. It talks about one of the parables with the different types of soil that Jesus is describing, fall on the rocks, fall on, the thorns. Well, the scary thing is one of those descriptive soils, the thorns, does anybody remember what the thorns were representing? Thorns in that parable are describing the cares and financial concerns of this world. So it actually fell on good soil, but the thorns kept it from growing up. We've got to be mindful of the thorns in our life, and we also have to view this as a spiritual battle. I really believe that. So, eternal perspective, faith-based by financial decisions. We're talking about that. That's integrated throughout the entire weekend. I've mentioned this in the past. Yesterday. Unity with our spouse. I make the joke, I'll say it again. When Courtney speaks up on a topic, I ignore her at my peril. I have been burned, people. I have been burned. She will suggest something, and it may not even be, her yelling at the top of her lungs. She'll say something, in my pride I ignore it. I have learned my lesson, Lord. I'm sure it will continue to happen, but there's wisdom there that I need to make sure that I'm honoring. Seeking biblically wise counsel. I don't mean call your Christian financial advisor necessarily. Talk to your pastors. Talk to your deacons. Don't assume that you have to talk to somebody older than you for them to be able to give wisdom. I have met some advisors that try to put that out there, and they're generally older, and so they're trying to establish themselves. I heard some fantastic principles from some of your leadership yesterday. This is important. You guys got a really rock solid group here. And then lastly, operating out of a few transcendent biblical financial principles. We've been talking about these. I've got a handout that I think I actually will be giving out tomorrow at Sunday school. Spending less than you earn, avoiding debt, building margin, giving generously, setting long-term goals, and the number one, understand that God owns it all. You master these, you're going to be sitting pretty. I really mean that. So that is financial contentment as an overall piece. But as I was saying, the debt wedge, you can actually eliminate. That is something that we are working towards. And if there's something that I would encourage you all to do is just to be mindful, not just about debt that you have, but also about any new spending, new debt decisions. So I've got a couple of scriptures, and we're gonna chat about a couple of things. So can somebody please turn to James? I got one in James, one in Psalms, and two in Proverbs. So first one is James 4, 13 to 15. James 4, 13 to 15. It's a favorite one of mine.
Go to now, you that say, today or tomorrow we will go into such a city and continue there a year and buy and sell and get gain. Whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away. That ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. But now you rejoice in your boastings, and all such rejoicing is evil. Therefore to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin.
The one sentence summary is, you are a mist. Here today, gone tomorrow. You presume in the future, you can get burned. So I was telling you about that mortgage example, right? Well, the analysis that Courtney and I did, it wasn't, long drawn out, just like I don't think many of us do when we're looking at a mortgage. Say, okay, we can afford this from an income standpoint. We want to live in a house. Okay, so we chose to take out that debt so that over the next 30 years or next 20 years, however long it would take us to save up to buy a house, we want to have that now. But we need to be very clear. There's a biblical principle there in this passage about presuming upon the future that we need to be aware of. Now, there are different levels of presuming upon the future. And I think that there's different levels of, it's going to sound weird, different levels of violation of this principle. We need to be mindful of what God's word is saying about presuming upon the future, and we need to be comfortable with how risky it is. We have a mortgage. I lose my job, I get injured without disability insurance or something. That can become a major problem. If that's not planned for, well, I will have violated this principle and I get burned. Well, if you assume everything will continue to go as planned and you will never experience any kind of financial difficulty or have any sort of emergency, I would suggest that you are asking for trouble. That is why an emergency fund is very important. That is why you should not be spending your raise before you get it. You should not be spending your bonus before you get it. Now, these are the principles that you want to follow routinely. I realize sometimes little things happen, but if you're making $60,000 a year, and 50 of that is salary, and 10 is generally bonus, I would encourage you to set the budget is not on the screen anymore. So I would encourage you to set that budget for that $50,000 mark, or what you're bringing home from 50 grand, not on 60. Because there will be years when things happen and you don't get that. That to me is being wise. And that affects how much debt we have. So there's kind of two categories. We've got kind of a critical, I'm overwhelmed, I'm getting calls from creditors and I'm scared to death. And then there's, I have a ridiculous amount of debt, I don't really know how to tackle it. Help me out. I don't know what category that you're in. I'm not, for those that are dealing with debt and struggling, those are the two most common categories that I see. If you have a note here that says most Americans struggle with a debt load of some sort. If you don't have any credit card, auto, or school debt, and you only have a mortgage, you are better off than by far than the average American. Because the average American comes out of school with 22, I think it's $22,500 in school debt right now. That's the average. It's the average. School debt has now exceeded credit card debt. They kind of flip back and forth. They're both wicked scary. So we want to be mindful of the decision, and we're going to go through a debt snowball. I've got a little 2-page handout. So James 4:13 and 15. It's unwise. Effective stewardship relies as little as possible on the future and more on living in what the Lord is providing right now and living within those means. That's very critical. Next one is Psalm 37, 7a. Psalm 37, 7a. Well, you could just read all of 37, 7.
All right, ready?
Fire away.
Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass.
All right, do me a favor, just read that first sentence again.
Rest in the Lord.
Rest in the Lord and wait patiently on him. If we're honest, rarely are debt is not because all of our debt is not because we had to do X or Y or Z. It is oftentimes because we did not wait for something. We did not wait for the Lord to provide, or wait to see if the Lord would provide. Remember that toddler's greed, I want it now, give me, give me, give me. We all struggle with that, and it rolls up to who's going to be the ultimate, who's ultimately in control of our life. I think that's part of what we're dealing with in our nation right now. even on gender decisions. And I'm not getting into this, but from a standpoint of, we want to control everything. We want to decide everything. Well, hand in hand with that is, I want something and I want it now. Okay? So when I graduated, I had a Camry. I don't know how old it was, 16, 18 years, 150,000 miles. And like a lot of people, I had been ingrained to think that once a car hits 100,000 miles, it could die at any moment. Right? That is car company marketing. It's kind of weird because they want to highlight how many awards they get and how long it lives, but then they also want you to keep buying them quickly. Okay? The average car payment right now is $525, and the average length of time is 60 months. 5 years. Cars are ridiculously expensive right now. So I come out of Gordon, and I'm living at home, First thing was, I gotta get a car. Then I gotta get a job. Oh, is that backwards? Worked out okay. But, so I've got this Camry, and the jobs I'm looking at are like 15 minutes away from my house. Not critical. I mean, how many of us have gotten how many of us take a desert to work each day, where if we get stranded, it's like life-threatening, like zero, right? So, gotta get a car, right? This could break down. That would be a crisis. So I go and I buy a car from CarSense. It's a Christian car company. It was used. It was 3 years old. 18 grand. Okay? That was that car that we ended up paying off by selling Courtney's little tiny Corolla before we went to the van. All right. Well, I had payments on that. I believe that by rushing into a decision, I eliminated an opportunity for the Lord to bless me. Any number of ways he could bless me. The simple of which is the car doesn't die. And maybe for another year or 2 or 3 or however long, I'm still driving it. The other thing is, let's be real. We've all heard some of these stories. Someone could have given me a car. But I'm too quick. I'm not interested in waiting. I go, yeah, now. I want this now. Now, I rationalize it in my mind. How often and how easy is that to do? But, okay, and it was an afterthought. But that was contrasted with what we did when we decided to go down to one car. We wanted to save up and pay cash for a car. And then in doing that, and I firmly believe that was the Lord demonstrating and blessing us in buying that, it was a 11-year-old Honda Odyssey with 180,000 miles on it. 3.5 years later, we sold it for $1,000. It had 260,000 miles on it, and I had replaced a tie rod and a windshield wiper and like tires. 3.5 years. I mean, it was insane. Courtney is smaller than me, shorter than me. I'm a tall guy. So we were constantly moving the seat back and forth, right? All the way back, all the way front. I get in it and I'm like this, so I gotta move it back. That broke on the van. And it was stuck all the way back. I was like, okay, it runs, it's fine. We actually were gonna upgrade because the doors were sticking, and we acknowledged that was going to be very difficult. We had 3 kids at the time, and when she goes food shopping and, she's getting a baby and one of the doors is not working, that's like, it's dangerous because kids are running around. We felt comfortable kind of saying it's time for the next step. So we were going to sell the car. Running fine, okay, still 14 years old, 15 years old. It's all for $1,000. Had 8 people lined up to buy this car, like 8, 9, 10, they were all going to come. First person bought it. The seat's stuck all the way back. So I'm like, Lord, you're going to have to send me a tall person. Okay? 5'0" woman shows up. She's got 4 kids. She buys it. She loves it. She's like, this is fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm like, well, how are you driving around now? Oh, we have a Corolla, or we have a Camry. 4 kids. There's not enough room there's not even enough seatbelts, much less, room for like car seats and whatnot. So we sold it. We bought it for $3,200. We sold it for $1,000, and we only paid like gas and tires and like $250 for a tire rod. That, in my respect, looking back, that was an opportunity that the Lord blessed us with a vehicle like that, because we did not rush the situation. And it was insightful for me because it was contrasting to what I had earlier done when I was like, well, my Camry's going to die. It may have died, but it may not. I could have kept that for another 3-4 years for all I know. Saved 18 grand. Cars are a bit, yeah. So, and that wasn't one of those decisions where Courtney was like cautioning me, that was just my own mistake. It wasn't like I just overruled her too. But looking at it, Cars are a major aspect of this debt problem. They really are. And it's growing. I mean, think back to the last car you bought. And I want to be clear. I'm not condemning anybody that's bought a new car. I'm not condemning anybody that's financing a car. It's decisions, right? It's all priorities. It's that budget spreadsheet. It's how it's broken down. You want to eat $800 a week in food? Fine. We choose to spend $25 a week in milk. You might think that's crazy. It's all priorities. It's what you want to get accomplished. Short and long-term goals. Cars are rarely demonstrated in what their total purchase price is. They're showing you what the monthly amount is.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to scare you out the door. These numbers, it's like college. When you look at colleges and they brag about all their graduation rates, it's rarely the graduation rates for their students in 4 years. It's a 5-year graduation rate. They're like, 98% of our students graduate. Well, that's good. What happens to the other 2%? But it's in 5 years. It's like a few years ago they figured out that if they aren't helpful in giving you a plan of attack, that they'll get another year of education costs out of you. That's a real problem. Sorry, I'll rabbit trail. But Psalm 37, 7a. Be willing to wait on God to provide for your needs within your current means. Credit cards have made it too easy for all of us to not wait patiently. We can get whatever we want right now, and we don't even have to think about it. Okay? And for some of us in the room, the bank of mom and dad has become an issue as well. Some of you are the bank. Some of you rely on the bank. Some of you don't like saying no to family. And I see that, we live right behind my parents, and I love my parents. I do. They're watching our kids right now, Thank you. But in their desire to help me and my 2 younger sisters, at times they have been the thing that we turn to instead of us being on our knees before the Lord. And that's a problem. Instead of, and I myself was guilty of it, the air conditioner broke, it's $1,300, before we had truly saved an emergency fund. Instead of me being on my knees and saying, Lord, I know we really don't need air conditioning, but I really want air conditioning. I want it more than the iPad. Lord, please help us. That didn't even happen. I placed a phone call and I was like, can I borrow the money? And it turned into a gift from my parents. I'm very happy, thankful for that. But sometimes we can unintentionally take the place of God, and that's very important to be mindful of. Next one is Proverbs 22, 26 and 27. So Proverbs 22, 26 and 27.
Be not thou one of them that strike hands, or of them that are sureties for debts. If thou hast nothing to pay, why should he take away thy bed from under thee?
Okay. Be mindful of the debt. And Proverbs 22, same chapter. You can read 22:7b. Read all of 22:7.
The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender.
Okay. Back in biblical times, for not paying your debts, you could actually become a slave to someone. Now, when we think of slave, we think of the South, and we think of how it was just abused. They were seen as property. But actually becoming a slave to someone in biblical times, you were still required to pay them and clothe them as they worked off their debt. But still meant that you belonged to somebody else until you paid it off. And that was something that was not seen as it was embarrassing. Bankruptcy has kind of taken that away. We've made it too easy for people to accrue debt. We've made it too easy for people to say, nah, that wasn't me, or I had a problem, and then just get out of jail free card. The note I have here is, do not borrow to make an investment just so that you can get rich quick. Guys, we know if something doesn't smell right, don't pursue it. And just because somebody is a believer, do not assume that every believer that you meet is a sinful being. Very important. Okay? Ponzi schemes? No, we're all familiar with Madoff, right? That kind of stuff. Well, there was a Christian Ponzi scheme that went around in the late 1990s, early 2000s that affected a lot of churches and a lot of Christian schools. My alma mater, Gordon College, was sucked into it, as was our home church. Now, luckily it wasn't to the tune of millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, but a lot of times people will overlook their natural due diligence because they believe somebody is a fellow follower of Christ. And even if they are a fellow follower of Christ, they're still sinful beings. Like, we got to be mindful of that. Wise as serpents, innocent as doves. Okay, don't be ignorant and don't assume that everything will go right. I was sharing with Laurie and Jordan that, we rented a car from Thrifty, and I was a little bit surprised because, you rent a car and sometimes they have the little, checkout station where they walk around the car with you, right? Because they want to make sure that, you're not bringing back a big old scratch. Well, I was a little miffed because at Thrifty, they had a little brochure thing right as you were walking out the door that had a little piece of paper on it, had little pens in a bin. I get out to the car and I realized that I could just get out to the highway. And I walk up to this Jeep Compass, it's in 2019. There's a piece missing from the roof. There's a piece missing on this brand new car, and there's some scratches on the back. And I'm like, ooh, this is not good. Where do I mark this down? And my mind suddenly went back to the store where I just walked by this little brochure holder. I walk back in, I grab one of these, I grab a pen, and I'm like, well, where do I turn this in? And they're, oh, you just give it back to us. They had no desire. They weren't pushing that on me because it doesn't affect them. If I bring this car back, if I hadn't filled that out, and I'm like scratch, 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 missing piece, I'm like doing every little thing, marking it up, giving them a copy, keeping a copy. If I choose not to do that and I go back there, they would be within their rights to say, where's this missing piece on our brand new car? And I'd be like, oh no, it was missing when I got it. Prove it. For all I know, they've charged the last 5 people for that. Now, I don't want to assume, I'm not trying to dig Thrifty, but I was a little surprised by that. To assume that the Lord's going to cover us in a scenario like that when He's given us a very keen mind, I think that we're asking for trouble. We need to be mindful of that. Remember that example I gave you where, the Bible very clearly says, don't cheat on your spouse? But it doesn't say, don't let your wife go jogging in Central Park, New York City at 2 a.m.? Well, He's given me a mind to know that that's not wise, even though it's not a biblical command. I should not be an idiot and say, oh, well, the Bible doesn't say I shouldn't let Courtney go jogging at 2 a.m. in a very dangerous park in New York City. Okay? So understand that there's wisdom here. There's very clear commands, but there's also principles. Next one is, other half of Proverbs 22, 26, and 7 is, do not guarantee another person's loan. Now again, not a command, just a principle. When you guarantee another person's loan, it's the same as taking the loan on yourself. Think about it. Why, if you're renting a car, renting an apartment, on a house, or even college loans, why does the school for a college loan require that mom and dad be on the loan? Are they doing that just because, they think mom and dad are going to keep the child in check? They're requiring mom and dad to be on the loan because little Johnny, he doesn't have any way to pay this loan back, and if he doesn't pay, they want to go back to mom and dad and get that money. Well, mom and dad shouldn't be, no, I'm not saying don't co-sign, let your kids go to college, but just be mindful of that. It's very, very important. So, a couple of things before we talk about, the logistics. Actually, I'm going to dive into the debt snowball. We have that? There are? Oh, wow. He's ahead of the game. Nice. I'm going to flip over to that. Okay, so debt snowball. This is another piece from our friends at Dave Ramsey's organization. So people in the financial world would say, oh, we've got 6 different types of debt. We've got credit cards, we got a car, we got a house. And, oh, what you should do is you should take the highest interest rate. You should pay that off first, right? Makes sense, right? It's the one that's costing you the most each month. But what Dave Ramsey points out, and what I really love, is that math didn't get you into that hole. Behavior did. We got to change behavior. If you're trying to dig out of a hole, Well, it's going to be really tough to dig out of that hole if you're continuing to go deeper. This is a way that you can go through this and see it. This suggests that you, one, get a handle on your debt. Step one in getting a handle on your debt is knowing what all of it is, and there's 3 components to what knowing all of it is. Number one is, what's the total balance? We all have had a debt in here at some time where it's like, ooh, I don't like that. I don't want to see those big numbers. I'm not going to look at it. Okay? Take this sheet, write down all of your debts. Total balance is one of the 3. The next one is what's the minimum payment. And I would throw a third one on there and say, what's the interest rate? Now, not that we're gonna make decisions just based on that, but you want to be mindful. You want to know how dirty the closet is, right? So throw all of those on the list. This suggests that you start from smallest balance and work your way down. So let's just use 3 debts, okay? You've got a credit card with $1,000, you've got a car loan with $5,000, and you've got a mortgage with $100,000. Well, if the mortgage is the highest interest rate, well, a lot of times, if you start with the highest interest rate one, that's not how you got into this problem. You need to just tackle it. But that could be years, maybe even a decade before you have fully paid that off. When you start from smallest balance to largest balance, well, you can see what all the minimum payments are. And that's what we're starting with. So remember our 3 debts. $1,000 on a credit card, $5,000 on a car loan, right? Car loan, and then, what did I say, 100? 100 on a house. You see all the minimum payments. You make all those payments, but as you have extra money, you tackle that smallest balance first. So you're making those minimum payments, you're tackling that smallest payment, and you get that paid off. Let's say you get that paid off in a month or 2. Well, now, what you do is you take that money that you were paying towards that credit card, you don't just start spending it, and you throw that towards the car loan. And then suddenly, you're getting that paid off maybe in 6 months' time. Then you take all that same money that you were paying both to the car and the credit cards, and then you tackle that towards the mortgage. Now, I used a very simple example of 3 debts. There's a reason that there's not just 3 lines on here, okay? The debt snowball, put it all on there. You need a second page? So be it. Wrap your arms around this closet. This is important, people. This is really important. If you feel overwhelmed by this, you got to get a handle on it, because you need to see. Remember that budget page? There was a block that listed the debts. If it's a crisis, and I would define a crisis if your debt payments owed exceed what's coming in the door right now, and you're working, that's a crisis. That's a different conversation. We could take that offline. I'm happy to chat with you privately, afterwards, by phone, whatever. We could talk about that, because now it's dire. It's like being on the battlefield and you've lost a limb. We got to put a tourniquet on them real quick. We got to get a handle on the debt snowball, and what's actually exciting about it is that if you have 15 debts on here and you've listed them, a bunch of times there's some smaller ones up top. You got Kohl's. You guys have Kohl's out here? Okay, they're still in business. They were in trouble last year. They're not as strong as you think. Be careful of retailers. So you got Kohl's and JCPenney and Macy's and Bath and Body Works, all that stuff on there. Little balances here and there, right? Maybe some credit cards. Well, list them on. Tackle them smallest balance to largest balance. It's not an overnight thing. Okay? You got into this mess a lot more quickly than it takes to get out. Let yourself feel this pain. This is what's important, okay? That's what Courtney and I are trying to do with the kids. When you go from one child to multiple children, things relax just the tiniest bit, because you can't watch 4 or 3. You don't have enough eyes or hands for each of their necks or whatever. From a standpoint of feeling the pain, what I try to do, and Courtney's better at it than I am, is when there's a problem or when the kids are doing something that is dangerous, is the danger to the level that, they're gonna fall off the playset and they're gonna hit their head and die? Or, it's gonna be an ER trip? Or are they going up the slide and if they fall, they might get a skinned neck or a skinned knee, but it'll be a lesson to them. If we're honest, in our experience as believers, it's the experiences where we have hit that table with our chin or ran into a wall, those painful experiences that are the most beneficial learning lessons in our lives. Well, it's important not to rob yourself of the reminder of this process of getting out of debt. Now, I'm not saying slow it up just so that you can have more of a reminder. Still tackle this, okay? You want to get out of debt as fast as possible. This is something where you want to be mindful of this process, and by listing them smallest to largest, you can actually get excited because oftentimes it builds as a snowball. That's why it's called the debt snowball. You're rolling through it pretty quickly. So this is kind of the debt snowball. Any questions on this process? Okay, yep. So last thing I have for you is this. There are 4 things that I will give you in terms of new debt decisions. Because as you're going through this process, okay, safeguards that I suggest to clients in how to evaluate new debt decisions. Number 1 is common sense. For borrowing to make sense, the economic reward needs to be higher than the cost. Business loans are a perfect example. Okay, if you have created a business plan, etc., and you believe a $10,000 loan is going to allow you to open that second store, and you are in faith, expecting that the risk is acceptable, okay, common sense. Consumptive debt, the Kohl's, JCPenney, now Cody loves Kohl's, it's fine, okay? The consumptive debt doesn't have an economic reward. You can't resell that outfit to pay off the debt, okay? Number 2 is a guaranteed way to repay. If you can repay the debt either by selling what the money was borrowed for or selling some other asset to cover that loan, it's get out of jail free card. That's what I call it. I like Monopoly. That's number 2. So number 1 was common sense. Number 2 is a guaranteed way to repay. Number 3 was peace of heart and mind. What I used to say to clients is, if we're looking for the Lord to give us a clear indication, I would suggest pray that the Lord would give you dissatisfaction of heart, disquietness was my word. And then somebody came out and pointed to me and showed that the peace of God cannot be counterfeited by Satan. Satan's a roaring lion, he loves discord, discomfort. He can fake the disquietness. He can't fake God's peace. So if you are seeking, and it's, husband and wife, Lord, give us both a peace about this decision. He will absolutely do that. It's happened to me and my business partner recently. Okay? Another Christian basically was, up a creek without a paddle, was out a major sum of money. We had inherited the asset that was providing for that. And we were under no legal obligation to pay him whatsoever. Story for another day. But we both separately felt led by the Lord, because we were praying for it, that we needed to make this right and do this. Now, we're still in the process of figuring out what that process looks like, but it's very clear, and that peace comes from the Lord. Number 4 is unity. If you are married, I can't stress it enough that if your wife is not on board with something, outside of a burning bush style moment, do not run with that unless the Lord has very clearly made it known to you that you need to pull out that 50.1% as the husband. And I'm speaking to the men right now. I jokingly say to Courtney, I don't pull that 50.1% out very often, equal partners, but as the leader, in God's eyes, I have to be absolutely sure that I pull out that 50.1 rarely and wisely. And that's because I've not done it. Even good things, even things that the Lord has laid on my heart, like, it's not important, but even something good that the Lord is very clear to me about, I took and ran with it. I didn't involve her, we weren't unified on it, and Lee ran off, and it suddenly wasn't the Lord's thing anymore. I'm talking about a certain type of giving even. It became Lee's thing. And it took a mentor of mine to say, is Courtney on board with this? Or, where do you stand? And I had to seek forgiveness from her and the Lord to say, and then sure enough, a month later, as we're praying about this, the Lord lays the same exact thing on my heart and her heart separately. But now we get, round two, we get to do it the right way. Unity with spouse. So those 4 things for new debt decisions. Common sense, guaranteed way to repay, peace of heart and mind, and unity. Last thing I'll leave you with is, it is very easy to justify what we need versus a want. Trying very hard to establish that with our kids, okay? I need new shoes. Earlier I was sharing it with the car. I need a new car. My car's gonna break down. Ooh, Lord's up there. I think he's just chuckling, saying, listen, Lee, you sound like a big old toddler. We need to be mindful about our motives and examining our motives. If we don't do that, it's too easy to just override and slip something through. So